Hello, I'd like to tell you a little bit about an interview I did with Reverend Laura Horton-Ludwig, a spiritual director. Actually, she's my spiritual director. So for this project for school, I had the opportunity to interview her, a deeply experienced spiritual director. Our conversation was honest, generous, and full of insight. Reverend Laura first heard about spiritual direction when she took a class for seminarians while attending Meadville Lombard Theological School, where she prepared to become a Unitarian Universalist minister. She deeply enjoyed the class, which extensively taught spiritual practices, began her spiritual formation, and was introduced to spiritual direction. One of her teachers, someone she later learned was Lucy Abbott Tucker, became her first spiritual director. I learned that Lucy Abbott Tucker had been at SDI since its inception and has taught spiritual direction and supervision for 36 years and is considered an eminent teacher of spiritual direction. What struck Reverend Laura at the time was the spaciousness of the relationship. Unlike therapy, it wasn't about fixing anything. It was a place to explore. Interestingly, it took about 15 years from that first exposure until she felt truly called to become a spiritual director herself. The turning point came when a colleague, an intern, was asked by a congregant to serve as their spiritual director. Her first reaction was jealousy, which she interpreted as a clue. I want to do that. That moment of clarity led her to train at the Hayden Institute, a program rooted in Jungian spirituality and grounded in a progressive, welcoming Christian tradition. Both of her parents were mental health professionals. In addition, her mother was Episcopal, so there was a connection there, since the Hayden Institute seems to have some overlapping connections with Episcopal Christianity. She spoke with real enthusiasm about the creativity, the dream work, and the deep exploration she experienced there. As her practice has evolved over the past 9 years, she moved from full-time ministry and part-time spiritual direction to part-time ministry and full-time spiritual direction. She suspects she will move into full-time spiritual direction later in life. Over time, her practice has changed as she has deepened her spirituality to trust the process, her ability to trust the process. Early on, she struggled with wanting to offer advice. She described herself as a fixer. She's developed a kind of spiritual muscle that allows her to hold silence, to let her directees find their own insight. When she's tempted to jump in, she might silently pray, "Spirit, please be with this person. I don't know what they need, but you do." She also talked about her spiritual ethics, particularly around working with helping spirits in her shamanic practice. She emphasized clear boundaries and consent, never doing spiritual work on someone, but instead asking for support for herself in holding space. Another thing she has had to learn is the business aspect of being a spiritual director. She is my spiritual director, so we had a lovely conversation where we negotiated the fee I would pay for spiritual direction. She has also has a beautiful website where she describes herself as a spiritual director, life coach, and shamanic practitioner. The banner message is, "Come home to the life you long for. Spiritual guidance, coaching, and healing for sensitive souls ready to reclaim their power, sparkle, and joy." You can view it at laurahortonludwig.com to see why she appealed to me as a spiritual director. I have also attended her shamanic journeying class, which I find extremely rewarding. And sometimes we talk about my journeys in my spiritual direction. Community plays a big role in her ongoing formation. She's part of a long-term supervision group, the UU Spiritual Directors Network, and smaller spiritual circles, what she sees as communities of support, accountability, and shared practice. These relationships help her stay grounded and continue her own growth. When I asked how her secular upbringing affected and shaped her spiritual work, because even though her mother was Episcopalian and her father was a Methodist, they really weren't practicing. She said it gave her less baggage, but also it made it harder to embrace the spiritual path at first. The turning point came unexpectedly through music. While studying classical voice, she joined a UU church choir for a paycheck and found herself moved to tears by the hymns and sermons. I got converted, she said. It paid me to come every week, and I got converted. At the end of our talk, she offered this encouragement to all of us in training. Trust the process, even when things feel confusing or bumpy. She said, each of you has inside the potential to be this beautiful listening presence. And that has really stayed with me. Thank you.